When the plane carrying El Chapo touched down in New York 2 years ago, the world's most wanted narco looked confused, overwhelmed even, asking the DEA agent, "Where am I?" "Nueva York," they told him. His face says it all. The most powerful drug lord ever to live, reduced to tears in the hands of U.S. federal agents.
All right, picture this. You're the boss of one of the world's most feared criminal organizations. You've got power, money, respect. People do whatever you say. Life's pretty good, right? But then, bam, you're busted. You end up in a courtroom, staring down a judge who's about to tell you you're never, ever getting out of prison.
It takes a huge force of heavily armed security to transport such a high-profile defendant like Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. A massive amount of manpower. A caravan of flashing lights traveling from the detentional facility in Manhattan across the East River to Brooklyn. It was there in the Brooklyn court that we learned the notorious international drug lord has had no direct contact with his family members since his extradition from Mexico last month. But today, Guzman's wife and his attorney from Mexico were in the courtroom with him. It was the first time he had seen them since leaving his home country. So far, he's been prohibited from seeing both.
That's exactly what happened to some of the most dangerous cartel leaders out there. And let me tell you, their reactions to getting life sentences were wild.
It's justice because I gave you more opportunities. I'm talking right now. Oh, you don't, do you? This is how you behave. You deserve every month that you get.
In this video, we're going to dive into the reactions of infamous cartel members when they found out they'd be spending the rest of their lives behind bars. Some tried to stay cool and collected, while others totally lost it. From anger to straight-up denial, we've got it all. So, stick around and let's break down how these cartel bosses handled their downfall. You've probably heard of El Chapo. This guy was the king of the drug game, running the Sinaloa cartel like a well-oiled machine for years. He was practically untouchable, right? Well, not anymore. After a long trial in 2019, El Chapo got slapped with a life sentence plus 30 years. And if that wasn't enough, he also has to pay $12.6 billion in fines. Yup, billion with a B. So, how did El Chapo take the news? You'd think someone like him would freak out or get angry, but nope. He just sat there, stone-faced, like he didn't even blink. Some people in the courtroom said you could feel the tension. I mean, here was this guy who had escaped prison twice and dodged the law for years, and now he was hearing that he'd never see the outside world again.
He's in his cell 23 hours a day. He gets 1 hour off to go exercise if the guards feel like letting him out. He has access to nothing. They sold him a little radio from the canteen. However, sometimes they don't sell him batteries, so the radio's useless.
He's locked up in ADX Florence in Colorado, which is known as the Alcatraz of the Rockies. It's basically prison hell. Inmates there spend 23 hours a day in solitary confinement, and El Chapo, who used to have people running all over for him, is now completely alone. Even though he didn't react outwardly, you know deep down he had to be freaking out. Now, if El Chapo was Mr. Calm, La Barbie was the total opposite. Edgar Valdez Villarreal, or La Barbie, was a top guy in the Beltran Leyva cartel. This dude wasn't just any cartel leader, he was known for being ruthless.
Authorities say 37-year-old Edgar Valdez Villarreal earned his nickname for his fair skin and blue eyes. Mexican police blamed the American-born lord for a murderous turf war. He allegedly led a gang that hung bodies from bridges and had shootouts in central Mexico, while distributing thousands of pounds of cocaine across the border into the U.S.
When he was finally caught and sentenced to life in 2018, he did not take it well. Instead of keeping quiet, La Barbie went off. He lashed out at the judge, straight up saying the justice system was as corrupt as the cartel he ran. Like, seriously? He really thought he could call out the U.S. legal system right there in court.
Both the U.S. and Mexican authorities offered rewards of up to $2 million for information leading to his arrest. The government fired nearly 10% of its federal police force as part of a campaign to root out corruption. Drug gang violence has claimed 28,000 lives since the crackdown began in 2006.
The New York Times captured his outburst perfectly when he yelled, "This system is corrupt, and you are no better than us." Yeah, that's what he said, word for word. He clearly wasn't ready to face the fact that he'd lost control, but that's the thing about life sentences. They don't care how big you were on the outside. Alright, now let's talk about Z40, aka Miguel Angel Trevino Morales.
The chubby man in black looks remarkably relaxed for a drug czar who's just been arrested for mass murder. Miguel Angel Trevino wasn't even a household name. He'd only been running the infamous Los Zetas since October. He was captured on this country road near the Texan border. With him, his bodyguard, his accountant, $2 million in cash, and an arsenal of weapons, not one of which was fired. There was the summary heading of 200 migrants. The casino fire which killed at least 50. The preferred method of killing involves beheading with chainsaws. Other victims are dissolved in vats of acid. Much of this was filmed by the Zetas, a kind of show and tell of horrors.
This dude was straight up terrifying. As the leader of the Zetas cartel, Z40 was known for doing some pretty horrible stuff, like things you can't even imagine.
He delighted in putting his victims in barrels, pouring gasoline over them, and then setting them on fire until they were nothing more than a crisp set of ashes.
So, when he got sentenced to life, you'd expect some kind of reaction, right? Wrong. This guy didn't flinch. He sat there with no emotion, just cold and blank, like he didn't even care.
Today's arrest has been hailed as a major victory by the state, but what difference will it make? The Zetas cartel boasts 10,000 members. What started off as a group of rogue special forces has become a state within a state. Its bosses have been arrested before. They are quickly replaced. Trevino, known mainly by his number Z40, replaced this man in October, whose name has already been forgotten.
According to BBC News, Trevino showed no visible signs of remorse or fear as the judge handed down his sentence. It was like he was totally disconnected from the insane level of violence he had caused. I guess some people just don't feel anything, even when the world is crashing down around them. Vicente Carrillo Fuentes was the leader of the Juarez cartel, and let me tell you, this guy had everything. He controlled one of the most dangerous cartels during the height of Mexico's drug wars. But when he finally got caught and sentenced to life in 2014, he wasn't the same man. He looked defeated, like he knew it was all over.
You're convicted because you're guilty. That's the plain and simple truth of it. The evidence showed that, the wiretaps showed that, and at the end of it all, I find that I would say you should be sentenced for your involvement, your participation in this racketeering enterprise, and your acquiring significant sums of money.
Carrillo Fuentes appeared gaunt and defeated as the judge handed down his sentence. The once powerful drug lord, who had controlled one of the most violent cartels in Mexico, now looked like a shell of his former self. I mean, talk about a fall from grace. One day, you're at the top of the world, and the next, you're just another prisoner. You might know Damaso Lopez Nunez as El Chapo's right-hand man, the guy who helped him escape from prison back in 2001. But after El Chapo was caught, Lopez Nunez tried to take over the Sinaloa cartel. Spoiler, it didn't go well. In 2018, Lopez Nunez was sentenced to life in prison, and his reaction was all about desperation. He begged the court for leniency, saying he had cooperated with the authorities and even betrayed his old boss to try to save himself. According to The Guardian, Lopez Nunez was basically like, I helped you guys, I cooperated, don't lock me up for life. But let's be real, once you're in this deep, there's no way out. His betrayal didn't get him anywhere. El Mauro was another big name in the cartel world. As the leader of the Santa Rosa de Lima cartel, he was responsible for a ton of violence in Mexico. When he was captured in 2020, people were wondering how he'd react to getting sentenced to life. Turns out, he was defiant right up until the end. El Mauro showed no visible signs of regret as he received his sentence for his role in countless murders, kidnappings, and extortions. Like, dude, at least pretend to be sorry. But nope, he wasn't backing down. Some guys just don't know when to quit, even when the game is over. Alfredo Beltran Leyva, another big player in the Beltran Leyva cartel, was sentenced to life in 2017. This guy was knee-deep in the cartel world, working closely with the Sinaloa cartel. But when his day in court came, reality hit him hard. Unlike some of the others, Beltran Leyva actually looked like he understood what was happening. He seemed kind of solemn. It was like all the years of running drugs and dodging the law had finally caught up to him. Beltran Leyva, who once controlled vast drug routes across Mexico and the US, appeared solemn and reflective as the judge handed down his life sentence. You could tell he knew it was game over for him. Now, it's not just about being locked up for life. For these cartel members, it's about the way they're locked up. Most of them end up in places like ADX Florence, a supermax prison that's basically the worst place you can be. Inmates there spend 23 hours a day in isolation with minimal human contact. I mean, can you even imagine being locked up alone, staring at the same walls day after day, with no one to talk to? That kind of isolation would mess with anyone's head, and it's definitely taking a toll on these guys. In an article by The Guardian, a former inmate of ADX Florence described the place as designed to break human beings. He went on to explain how the constant isolation and sensory deprivation get to you after a while. And when you think about these cartel members, who were once surrounded by an army of loyal followers, sitting in a small, empty cell with nothing but their thoughts, it's a whole different kind of punishment. El Chapo, for example, might have seemed stone-faced in court, but insiders say he's really struggling with the isolation. He spends 23 hours a day alone in a concrete cell with no real access to sunlight or fresh air. His mental and physical health have seriously deteriorated. No more lavish parties, no more command over an empire. It's just him, a bed, and 4 walls. You can't help but wonder if, deep down, these guys wish they could turn back time. So, what happens now? For most of these cartel bosses, their time is done. They've gone from ruling entire drug empires to living out the rest of their days in a tiny cell. And while they're locked up, the world keeps spinning. New cartel leaders rise, new wars are fought, and the cycle of violence continues. But the truth is, even though these men are behind bars, their legacies still have a hold on the world. Cartels like Sinaloa and Juarez didn't just disappear because their leaders were taken down. New faces step up, and sometimes the violence only gets worse. In a way, these life sentences are a victory for justice, but they're not the end of the story.
He was the primary provider of morphine during that time period within Antrim County. He kept going back to Saginaw and was getting 800 pills a month, bringing them back here. Hopefully his sentencing at the high end of the guidelines and the consecutive nature will send a message to anybody that may want to fill that vacuum that regardless of your age, there is a consequence if you are caught trafficking this quantity of controlled substance.
Here's another thing people don't often talk about: the families of these cartel leaders. For some of them, their sons or nephews are ready to step in and take over the business. It's not uncommon to see the next generation picking up where their fathers left off. Take El Chapo's sons, for example, often referred to as Los Chapitos. They've already been linked to trafficking and violence, and they're trying to keep the Sinaloa cartel running. El Chapo's sons, known as Los Chapitos, have been working behind the scenes to continue their father's empire. The influence of these cartel families is hard to shake off, and even with their leaders in prison, the power struggles and violence continue.
Unimaginable brutality has become common currency in Mexico's war, which has claimed more lives than Syria's civil war. At least 85,000 since 2006, when the authorities began to crack down on the cartels.
So, what do these life sentences actually mean for the future of cartels? Honestly, it's kind of a mixed bag. On one hand, taking out big players like El Chapo and Z40 sends a message: even the most powerful criminals aren't untouchable. It gives law enforcement a win, and it might make some people think twice before diving into the cartel life. But on the other hand, cartels are like hydras: cut off one head, and another one grows back. When leaders are taken down, younger, more ruthless guys are often waiting in the wings, ready to take over, and sometimes they're even worse.
If it weren't for the demand for drugs from America, Mexico wouldn't have a problem. It produces few drugs itself, but it is the gateway to the American market across the border. The curse of corruption meets the curse of geography.
Plus, the violence doesn't just end because someone is locked up. In fact, it can spark power struggles that make things even bloodier. The arrest of top cartel figures has done little to curb violence. In some cases, it has even fueled more brutality as rival factions fight for control. So, while these life sentences are definitely a win for law enforcement, they don't necessarily mean the end of cartel violence. At the end of the day, these cartel members who once ruled over entire empires are now facing a new reality, spending the rest of their lives in a cell. Some, like El Chapo, tried to stay stone-faced, while others, like La Barbie, couldn't handle it and lashed out in court. Whether they were defiant or defeated, one thing's for sure: life as they knew it is over. But even though they're locked up, the story doesn't end here. Cartels continue to operate, and their legacies live on through the violence they left behind. The world of trafficking is always shifting, and while taking down a few big players helps, it's far from over. So, what do you think? Do these life sentences send a strong enough message, or is it just a temporary solution? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this breakdown of cartel members' reactions to life sentences, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.